Well, hello and welcome to this series of learning videos on the Android platform. I'm Colin Archibald speaking to you from beautiful suburban Ocoee. And the objective of these videos is to get you started programming in Android. And Android is not difficult. It's just that it's very different from what you've seen before. So there are lots of little places where you need to step up into understanding specific aspects of it, and then once you get there you're kind of on your own. You can look at the example code and you can go through the tutorials that are provided by Android, and you can pretty much do it the way that you want to do it. So the purpose of these is not to show you or demonstrate everything that you can do in Android. The purpose is to get you started and to get you over those bumps. So the prerequisite for this course is Java programming. You have to know how to program in Java. For us, that's COP 2800, the Java programming course. The advanced Java programming course might be a little bit better, but it's kind of fun to pick up things as you go along as well. So you can't be completely in the dark about Java, but you don't have to be an expert Java programmer to get started in Android, and you might learn more Java as you go along, and that's a good way of doing it too. Okay, so let's start right away. So the first thing you want to do, other than listen to this introduction, is to set up your machine to develop in Android. And all of the demonstrations that I'm going to do in these videos are using a PC with Windows, and you don't have to use that environment. You can set up your machine if you are using a Linux-based machine or a Macintosh-based machine. So once you get started with writing code in Eclipse, there's really not that much difference between your development environments. Eclipse looks very much the same in all platforms. So while you're watching these, you should have your Eclipse development environment open at the same time and flip back and forth, so you go along with me as opposed to just watching, because if you just watch it, you won't really get it, and you won't be able to understand what to do on the next one. Some of programming in Android seems to be, well, this is how you do it, and you don't get a complete explanation. You just do it that way, and you know that it will work because it worked the last time you did it. So you have to be practicing along with it, or the play-along demonstrations are of really very little value. It's not acting, this is not entertainment, although it shouldn't be drudgery either. You should be able to just go along and learn it. So there's a guide out there for Android developers, the official Android Developers Guide, and it's quite difficult to read. So I'm using that, and I'm using some textbooks, and I'm going to be the guide through the guide, so to speak. Okay, let's step back and talk about the history of Android, because it's really quite interesting, and if you understand how it happened, you'll understand why it has a very good chance of success, and why it's completely a different process from the way the iPhone happened. Maybe better, maybe not better, but very, very different. So a group of companies got together, 79 of them, and they formed this alliance, the Open Handset Alliance. And they wanted to agree on what a development platform should look like for mobile devices. So a handset alliance probably isn't the name that they would have picked now, because a tablet probably isn't really what we think of. A tablet computer isn't what we think of as a handset. You think of that as like a cell phone. So the creation of these open standards by lots of partners in the industry, there's lots of examples of how this has worked. The Universal Serial Bus, the USB standard was a collaboration of several large companies, and it just makes sense if you want a whole lot of companies to be able to develop for one standard, then you get together and agree on what the standard should be, and then just open it up and see what people will create for it. So Android is an open source platform. That means that you can see the code if you want to, and the developer's platform is free. Marketing your application in Android is very open. So for $25 you can establish the right to be in the Android market. And it's a pretty interesting way of doing it, and Google has kind of surprised the industry many times with their approach to doing things. So let's make it clear that this is not all fun and collaboration and everybody happy. So Google owns Android, and the apps in Android are written in Java, and Oracle owns Java. So there is currently disputes between Oracle and Google. That's a nice way of saying Oracle is suing Google over the use of Java in Android. And this is one in a series of lawsuits that are going on in the industry. One company is suing another based on how they're using their stuff and who owns what intellectual property. If we didn't do anything until all of those lawsuits were settled, we probably wouldn't ever do anything. So you might remember that Sun Microsystems sued Microsoft over the use of Java, and they won. So Microsoft was not allowed to ship anything called Java ever again after that. And Java survived, and Microsoft survived, and the industry went on. So I wouldn't, if you're reading about the gloom and doom of all of these lawsuits, I wouldn't worry about them. If there are legal orders to change things, then we'll change things. But nothing is going to absolutely just go away all of a sudden. It has too much inertia. So I talk about this as if there's this huge, long history of how Android has happened, and it really isn't. But I found this really nice graphic from addictivetips.com that really does a good job of telling the story. So let's go and look at this Addictive Tips timeline of the Android platform and the devices that have been released for Android. Okay, so here's an Android timeline, and I know you can't see it. We're going to zoom in on it and kind of go along. Here we are. Back to the beginning. So the releases of Android have these icons with them, and they have version numbers. So 1.0 was Android, and here is the little Android icon, and then each of them was a dessert. So 1.5 is cupcake, 1.6 is donut, and then we went to eclair and froyo, and then the most recent one that was released as of right now was the gingerbread. And I'll talk about gingerbread a little bit. So here are some of the companies in the Open Handset Alliance. So large companies, very successful companies that you would expect to be in this kind of a software, hardware, computing-like environment. So some telephone manufacturers and some software companies. Dell was a late joiner to this alliance, so there are now some Dell hardware being released. And it goes back, the The first announcement of Android was in 2007, so there was an Android platform in 2007, but the first piece of hardware that actually used it was the this guy, the G1, and it came out in October of 2008. So that's really not very long ago, October of 2008, and at the time this graphic was made, the purpose of this is to help you decide which of the versions of Android should you use. If you use a very old one, like if you use Android 1.5, which was Cupcake, everything after that would work. So if you wrote your software in 1.5, it would still work on a device that uses 1.6 and 2.1, 2.2, and so on. If you develop your code using 2.2, it will not work going backwards. So if someone has an Android with 1.5 on it, you are not writing code that they can use if you're using one of the newer ones. So they call this forward compatibility. If you write it in 1.5, it will still work on the newer devices. But if you use the stuff that's new and great in 2.2, then you have restricted your audience. So the reason for this distribution is to show you that at the time of making this, the largest group of users were using Android 2.1. Now that's very time sensitive, so you should look up a distribution if that's of interest to you for marketing your application. So 1 million of them, 1 million G1s sold in the first 6 months. So you kind of knew that something important was happening even back in October of 2008. And then the devices started coming out. So HTC, one of the companies that was in the original group of the Handset Alliance, and Galaxy, there's a Motorola, this one still using Cupcake, 1.6, the 15th of September in 2009. So all of these devices are coming out in 2009, and we went from 1 million units of the G1 in October of 2008. Now we're saying 7.7 million units were sold in 2009. 7.7 million. So a product that came out just in 2008 sold 7.7 million in 2009. So they started coming out faster and faster. And lots of Motorola devices with the sliding keyboards, the screen that flips over top of the keyboard, every combination that you can think of. Now Dell is starting to release devices in 2010. So all of these are devices from in 2010. And this graphic was made right at the end of 2010. So even this is a little bit dated. Consider this. At the end of 2010, we are activating 200,000 new phones on the Android platform every day. 200,000 new phones every day. And here at the end of 2010 is something that very much dates this graphic because it's wrong. It says that Gingerbread is coming soon, and Gingerbread was released in December of 2010, but it was not 3.0. It was released as 2.3. So we don't even have graphics that can keep up with this. So 2.3 is Gingerbread, and 3.0, they decided that version 3.0 of Android would be the Android which is specifically aimed at programming for tablets. So all of the interest in the first 3 years has been on the phone, and you might remember that there was a little device released called the iPad, and that has caused some concern that maybe Android should be using the iPad, and the market projectors, people who are expert in these things, are saying that tablets will be more important than laptops, and there will be a large market for different kinds of tablet machines, and the computing platform used will be a very profitable one, whatever one is the most successful in that industry. So that's where we are right now. Lots and lots of different handsets, and starting now to talk about the use of Android for tablets. And what will come next after this? Well, we already know that Android will go into, as a development platform, it will go into other electronic devices, including things like televisions. So there's a huge consumer market, and we start to blur the difference between watching television and surfing the web. People will refer to this as converging technologies or convergence technologies. So let's start thinking about what Android actually is. Well, look at the bottom first. This is the hardware device, either the phone, the handset, or the tablet. And people call Android an operating system. I really don't like that. I think it should be called a development stack or a software stack, but the operating system, the one that actually runs on the hardware, is a version of Linux, which is tuned to running on small devices. So everyone is familiar with Linux, but you didn't necessarily know that all Android devices have Linux inside. So what runs on Linux? We have a set of native libraries, so native code that are written for the Linux operating system, and they're written in C. So you can program an Android device using the C language. You wouldn't unless you are a device manufacturer and you want to write the routines that are being called to control your device. So the very low-level code is written in C. So what sits on top of this? This is a Java virtual machine. It's not quite the same as the JVM from Sun Microsystems, now Oracle. It's called Dalvik, which is the town in Iceland where the guy who wrote it came from. That's my understanding of it. So it's not really a Java virtual machine. It's not exactly the same as a Java virtual machine that you'd have for a general purpose piece of hardware. It is a Java virtual machine that is fine-tuned for running on these specific kinds of devices. So the user interface capability you would have in a usual Java virtual machine are not there, for example. But most of the Java language is there, and this Dalvik virtual machine behaves very much the way you would expect. So on top of that, what runs on the virtual machine? The first thing is the Android framework. So framework is a set of classes, and they're provided for you to call upon to use these classes when you build your applications. So at the top are the apps, the system apps that come with your device, like the dialer and the contact manager, all of the things that ship on a standard Android device. And those are written in Java and executed on the Dalvik virtual machine. And these applications that ship with the machine use the very same Java classes as your Android app. So you're going to write an application that sits on the Android device in the same way that the apps that come on the Android device, they're created with the same tools. That's what I'm trying to say. So this is the very, very high level description of what the Android software stack looks like. So down at the bottom, if you're writing native code, you're working in the C language, and not many people work down there. The apps that we'll write are all going to be done up here using the Android framework and executing on the Dalvik virtual machine. So here's a website that we will go to quite often, android.com. And if you're an Android developer, you go to this part. If you want to look at the marketplace, the applications that are available, you can look in the Android market. That's actually very new. Up until very recently, the only way to learn about the apps that were available and to buy them for your device was to do it using the device. And that's a big problem, because the screen is tiny, and browsing around for things with a tiny little screen, that was a problem. So now you can look at all of the applications that are available, and the developers link is the one that's going to be the most interesting to us. So this is the home page of developerandroid.com, and the developer guide has lots and lots and lots of information, probably too much information for people who are at this stage. So using this and this developer's guide, and using a few different textbooks that I'll pull things out of, I'll lead you through this, hopefully painlessly. So if you want to read more about where Android came from and what it is, have a look at the What is Android link, and here's a very nice picture of the things that we just talked about. The Linux kernel is down at the bottom. Here are the classes that you can use in your applications, and the applications that are shipped, like the contact manager and, well, just the phone itself. And there's a browser that runs, that ships standard, and so on. So here's the Dalvik virtual machine, and a slightly different picture of Android than the way I described it, but pretty much the same. So a bunch of stuff written in C here that runs very close to the hardware on the Linux operating system, and then the Java classes and the applications. So dig around in here if you feel like it, and get comfortable with this particular site and just kind of where Android is coming from. Okay, so here's what we did in this first segment. We talked about how Android came about. These scores of companies, dozens and dozens of companies that cooperated to say this is what it should look like, and the Open Handset Alliance really is where this platform came from. Google owns Android, and Oracle owns Java, and Android applications are programmed in Java. The interesting thing here to me is the 200,000 Android handsets activated each day. If you do some math with that number, it's kind of difficult to believe, but I don't know, I'll believe it. If there's you each have 6 of them in your house, maybe that's possible. It's easy to become an independent app developer, and this is one of the things that Google has done that's different from the industry, and it's one of the things that makes Android development appealing, especially to young people who immediately want to start their own company and write an app that will make millions of dollars on the first day. And that's really quite possible, almost. I mean, there are lots of people who develop successful applications, but there are lots of people making a lot of applications. So realistic objectives, realism would be nice. You won't be frustrated later on. But that doesn't mean don't go for it. Of course you should go for it. Now set up your machine. If you haven't gone to Appendix 1 up until now, set up your machine for creating Android apps. The process for doing that is fairly difficult. So there are several steps. You have to get them all right. And you can't do anything else until you have a machine set up that can make the Hello Android World application and run it. So it's step by step in Appendix A. So go and do that right away. We really can't go to the next segment until everyone can do that.